Hi guys, this is Dr. Ketki from Toothism. We learned the classification of impacted third molars and how to assess the difficulty level in the previous video. Today we are going to learn the surgical technique of removing the impacted third molar. So let's begin. We will divide the surgical technique into 5 basic steps which start after giving local anesthesia. So step 1 is gaining access. How do you gain access to the impacted tooth? By reflecting the tissues over it, right? So the first step is reflecting adequate mucoperiosteal flap so that we get proper access and we can see the whole surgical area for removing the bone over the tooth and also for sectioning of the tooth. For surgical extractions, we need a full thickness mucoperiosteal flap. Full thickness means it should include the mucosa, submucosa and the underlying periosteum as one entity. So to raise this type of flap, we need to take a sharp incision which is full thickness, meaning it should extend completely till the underlying bone. Then only we can get a full thickness flap. Now, the flap design also should be decided prior to making the incision. So, one is envelope flap. As you can see in this flap, the incision extends from the mesial papilla of the mandibular first molar around the necks of the teeth to the distobuccal line angle of the second molar and then posteriorly and laterally up the anterior border of the ramus. Care should be taken that this posterior extension should not be too lingual because lingually we have the lingual nerve and we don't want to damage it. Disadvantage of this flap is that it can damage the periodontal ligaments when creating sulcular incisions around a tooth. Second type of flap is three-cornered flap or triangular flap. As you can see here, we have a releasing incision. So this gives us wide exposure and better access. Also, it decreases flap tension while we are retracting the flap. So there is rapid wound healing. Now let's look at some incision designs. Watt's incision starts about 6 mm inferiorly in the buccal sulcus at a point that corresponds to the junction of anterior 2/3 and distal 1/3 of mandibular second molar. The incision is then taken vertically upwards to the neck of the second molar, passes around the gingival margin of posterior 1/3 of the tooth and continues cervically on the distal aspect to approximately the midpoint of the tooth, and from this point the incision runs posteriorly and buccally along the line of the external oblique ridge. Modified Watt's incision is the same except the anterior part of the incision starts at the distobuccal corner of first molar instead of second molar. This is used when the third molar is completely unerupted, there is inadequate depth of the buccal vestibule, and when the third molar is linguoverted, meaning lingually directed. For maxillary third molar also there is envelope flap which extends from mesial aspect of the second molar to the maxillary tuberosity posteriorly. But if the third molar is deeply embedded in the bone, then we require more exposure, right? In this case, a vertical releasing incision is given from the mesial aspect of the second molar, so now it becomes triangular flap. After the incision is complete, the flap is reflected using a mucoperiosteal elevator, and after flap reflection, it should be retracted using a Minnesota retractor or Austin's retractor to protect the flap, and the edge of the retractor should always be resting on the bone and not on the flap. So the flap tissue should not be trapped under the retractor. The next step is removal of the bone. It's important that it is not done haphazardly. If the crown of the impacted tooth is not seen, the first step is uncovering the coronal portion of the tooth. So with a round burr, bone is removed until the crown is identified and we can see the orientation of the crown. After that, next step in bone removal is to create a trough on the buccal aspect of the crown. It's like a ditch around the tooth as you can see here, which is created using the fissure burr. keeping the burr parallel to the long axis of the tooth. So this is called as buccal trough. The purpose of creating this trough is you get space to use the straight elevator, and the buccal bone then can be used as a fulcrum. So this trough should not be too wide, otherwise what will happen is the elevator will rotate freely in it. We don't want that. So the buccal trough should be just wide enough to accommodate the straight elevator. With proper attraction of the soft tissues, this trough can be extended around the distal aspect of the tooth but never on the lingual aspect, because there is a risk of lingual nerve injury here. Next question is, how much should be the depth of this trough that we are creating? So it should be till the level of the furcation of the buccal aspect of the tooth. Why? Because it will give us access to the furcation so that it will be easy to section the tooth if required. For maxillary teeth, usually bone removal is not necessary, but when it is required, bone is primarily removed from the buccal aspect of the crown down to the cervical line to expose the entire clinical crown. Another important point in bone removal is one should never use the regular handpiece that we use for restorative dentistry. We need a straight handpiece. The reason is the straight handpiece has higher torque, which results in more cutting efficiency and less heat at the bone to burr interface. So a straight surgical handpiece is a must for bone removal. Another reason why we should not use a regular high-speed air-driven handpiece is the possibility of subcutaneous air emphysema. So it happens because of air under pressure being driven into the subcutaneous tissues of head and neck. When it happens, there is a facial swelling, and usually it resolves itself spontaneously in about 10 days, but it can be potentially life-threatening, which is why we should always use straight surgical handpiece for bone removal. In a study that was done by Augustine et al., it was found that during bone drilling, temperature could rise above 47 degrees Celsius, and above this temperature, irreversible necrosis of the bone results. So while bone removal, we need external irrigation. Usually we use normal saline. Step 3 is sectioning the tooth. In this picture, you can see the sectioning of a horizontally impacted tooth. Now, the direction in which the tooth should be divided depends on the angulation of the tooth. As you must know, sectioning is done with a burr, but the tooth should not be sectioned completely with a burr from buccal to lingual, because if we use the burr all the way from buccal to lingual side, there is a risk of injury to the lingual nerve. So for this reason, the tooth should be sectioned only 3/4 of the way towards the lingual aspect. It will create a slot. The shaded area here in blue color is showing the cut, as you can see, and now a straight elevator can be placed in the slot and rotated to split the tooth. Now let's see how to section a mesioangular tooth. There are a variety of ways to section the mesioangular tooth. One way is making the cut from buccal groove to the cervical line on the distal side. In this way, the distal half of the crown is sectioned and removed, and then the rest of the tooth is removed using an elevator which is placed at the mesial aspect of the cervical line. Another way is to section the tooth into mesial and distal parts through the furcation. As you can see, the distal part is removed first and then the mesial portion can be removed using an elevator. Sometimes the mesial portion of the crown is trapped under the crown of the second molar. In this case, first we section the tooth into mesial and distal parts and then section the mesial portion of the crown from the root. So this mesial portion of the crown is removed separately and then the mesial root is removed. One more way to section is sectioning in such a way that the crown and root is removed separately. So here a transverse cut is made parallel to the cemento-enamel junction. The roots also might need to be sectioned to remove them. Next is horizontal impaction. So here we first have to expose the superior aspect of the distal root and most of the buccal surface of the crown. Then the tooth is sectioned at the cervical line. So this will divide the tooth into crown portion and root portion. First the crown is removed and now this will create space for elevation of the roots. So roots are now elevated using an elevator. Now if the roots are divergent, even the roots will have to be sectioned and removed separately. Sectioning the vertically impacted tooth is almost similar to mesioangular tooth, because here also the distal half of the crown is sectioned and removed, and then the rest of the tooth is elevated by applying the elevator on the mesial aspect of the cervical line. But this is more difficult than mesioangular impaction because access around the mandibular second molar is difficult to obtain, so we need to remove more bone. The most difficult is distoangular impaction because, as you can see, more bone has to be removed from the distal aspect to fully expose the crown. Now the crown is first sectioned and removed, and then a purchase point is made on the remaining root. This purchase point will help engage the crier elevator, and then with wheel and axle type of motion we can remove the roots. In case of maxillary teeth, the overlying bone is thin and elastic, so sectioning is rarely required. Now you can understand the difference between extraction of an impacted third molar and a tooth from elsewhere in the mouth. You see, there is almost no luxation done for expansion of the socket, because if we try to do that, we might apply excessive force which can result in unfavorable fracture of the tooth or fracture of the second molar or even fracture of the mandible. Therefore, mandibular impacted third molars are usually sectioned. Step 4 is delivery of the sectioned tooth. For this, mostly a straight elevator or crier or crane pick elevator is used. In this picture, you can see the straight elevator being used, and you can also see the extracted tooth. So this was a horizontally impacted tooth which was sectioned, and the crown and root were removed separately. Let's see how maxillary teeth are delivered. So maxillary teeth are delivered using a straight elevator, and pressure is applied to displace the tooth in a distobuccal direction. While doing this, the surgeon's finger should be on the maxillary tuberosity, because if accidentally the tuberosity fractures, it can be stabilized. Also, it helps the tooth from getting lost in the infratemporal space. Coming to step 5, which is preparing the wound for closure. This means socket debridement. In this step, we inspect the socket. If there are any sharp edges of the bone, it should be smoothened using a bone file. After tooth extraction, there are a lot of bone chips and debris in the socket. So these have to be removed by irrigation with sterile saline and suction. Irrigation should also be done under the flap. If there are any remnants of dental follicle, then it should be removed using a small hemostat. And before suturing the wound, a final irrigation and thorough inspection should be performed. Usually, a primary closure can be obtained, meaning the wound edges are in direct opposition. If you have made a releasing incision, it doesn't need to be sutured. In one of the studies, partial closure and complete closure was compared. Partial closure means one suture knot was tied at the end of the corner of the triangular flap and one suture at the distal aspect of the second molar. And complete closure means additional suture is given for closing the releasing incision. It was shown that complete closure is not necessary because there was no significant difference in pain, trismus and swelling in both of the groups, and additionally partial closure reduces operating time also. Also, it helps with drainage of the exudate. So I hope you had fun learning today. If you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon. I'll be back next week, and until then, keep studying and keep learning.